Namaste, one and all. Welcome to this session of Adi Shankaracharya Festival 2025. We will start with prayer. Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwara, Gurur Sakshat Parabrahmam, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Let us welcome Swami Narasimhananda. I'm sure most of you might have heard him on YouTube or might have attended his lectures in at various ashrams of Ramakrishna Math and missions because he's very popular speaker. Swami Narasimhananda ji, he is a monk of Ramakrishna Math and mission, which was founded by Swami Vivekananda in 1897. Right now, he's the secretary of Ramakrishna Mission Sevashrama, Kozhikode in Kerala. They run the higher secondary school from kindergarten to the 12th standard and also a polyclinic. Then he was the editor of Prabuddha Bharata. It is one of the most revered journal which was founded by Swami Vivekananda himself in 1896. Swamiji has edited the book which contains the Swami Vivekananda's teachings, and the book is called Vivekananda Reader. As I have told you earlier, Swamiji is very popular speaker and he is giving his addresses in various languages. He specializes in Indian philosophy and religious studies. He is a member of international interdisciplinary and interreligious research group called Consciousness Studies under the UNESCO chair in bioethics and human rights at Pontifical University, Rome, Italy. He also gives in classes in spirituality and management in different leading management institutes. He also regularly addresses youth across India, particularly in education institutions of national importance. Then he is the adjunct faculty of consciousness studies in National Institute of Advanced Studies in Bengaluru. And he is a polymath. He can speak different languages. He can speak and has different publications in Hindi, English, Sanskrit, Malayalam, Bengali, and Tamil. I request Swamiji to start his address.
Oh. Suprabhatam to all of you. Today the topic is reasoning of the logical reasoning of Adhyasa Bhashya of Bhagavad Shankaracharya. As we all know, in Indian philosophy, Bharatiya Darshana, we have mainly two kinds of philosophies. One that follows the Vedas and those who do not follow the Vedas. Generally, in the tradition of Astikya Darshana, that is the philosophical traditions who follow the Vedas, it is considered that Vedas are an authority, and to make a point, to argue a point, quoting of Vedas is quite common. What makes Adhyasa Bhashya, among its other specialities which we will look into, is that Bhagavad Shankaracharya, he does not quote any text to prove his point. He uses logic and only logic. And that too, he does it in a lucid language, in a language which is understandable to everyone. So that in the beginning itself, one has to say that it is a master stroke of Bhagavad Shankaracharya, that he does not use any kind of quotation, he does not take recourse to any kind of textual authority. Also, he does not go into any kind of traditional authority. he does not bring much of complications which are involved in philosophy in general. By taking the reader to day-to-day experiences, he explains that there is something called Adhyasa. There is something called superimposition. And he does it so well that some people mistook him to be a person who is a Mayavadi. That means one who argues for the existence of Maya, which he is not, obviously. He is a Brahmavadi who argues for the existence of Brahman. That means who tells you that Brahman exists. Why this misconception? Why this notion? Because Bhagavad Shankaracharya, in his Adhyasa Bhashya, which is for such a prominent text, quite short in its length, he there explains the problem and, of course, the solution out of it. So the problem is that we mistake something for something else. This is exactly how Shankaracharya, Bhagavad Shankaracharya, explains the problem of Adhyasa. Mistaking something for something else. Now, defining Adhyasa and giving it or relating it with other synonyms like avidya, ajnana, etc., is something which he does with great clarity in the Adhyasa Bhashya. And that is one of the special qualities of this text. He describes it. What is Adhyasa? What does he mean by Adhyasa? The superimposing of one thing over the other, and not just the thing itself, but also the qualities of that thing over the other. That is Adhyasa. And this superimposition happens because of mistaken notion. So mistaking one thing with the other. And also mistaking the dharma, that is the properties of the thing, with other. So there is Adhyasa of the Vishaya and there is the Adhyasa of the dharma of the Vishaya over the Vishayi. So this is what Bhagavad Shankaracharya tells in the beginning itself. And this is the human experience. Many schools of Advaita, even just before Bhagavad Shankaracharya, they denied the human experience. They did not acknowledge the human experience of this mistaking one thing for the other. They simply denied it. They did not acknowledge that. But in the beginning itself, Bhagavad Shankaracharya Deva, he says that, see, this is something which is illogical, but it is naisargika, it is natural, it is loka vyavahara, it is what we see generally in practice. So the human experience is based on a mistaken perception. The human experience is based on Adhyasa. By saying this, Bhagavad Shankaracharya Deva has made it very clear that the problem of Ajnana or the problem of Adhyasa is difficult to conquer because this is the basis of all our transactions, all our dealings, all our experience. Though it is mithya jnana, though it is something which is fallacious, though it is something which makes truth into untruth, satya anrite mithuni kritya, it confuses, it kind of jumbles up truth with untruth, though that is the case, but this is naisargika hai, this is natural, this is loka vyavahara hai. So, one, what is Adhyasa? Very clearly defined. Second, that though it is difficult to accept logically, this is what we do. This is what we experience. This is what we deal in. So these two things, when the Bhashyakara says, then he puts across very clearly how all the basis of all human experience is a mistaken perception of reality. And so then he goes further. There he says that all this idea of means of knowledge, pramana, that comes because of adhyasa. All our understanding, all our knowledge is based on knowledge in the sense of knowledge based on the sense organs is based on adhyasa. So if there were no adhyasa, we would not have this knowledge. In fact, one could extend this argument and say that even logic, even the relation of cause and effect is based on adhyasa. So this is the problem. The problem is that even the process of identifying a problem in our life involves adhyasa. And so the difficulty here is to understand the substratum or the kind of the cause of all these problems. It is so difficult. And so finally he will take us to the point that only by studying Vedanta or by studying the Brahma Sutras, we will be able to understand this problem and also the solution out of this problem. So before going that, the Bhashyakara, Bhagavad-pada Shankaracharya Deva, he is making it very clear that all the experiences which we have is based on adhyasa, is based on ajnana, based on avidya. So now this leads to the conclusion that adhyasa is where all knowledge and experience happens. Experience as we know it, knowledge as we understand it, where you have something to be known, a process by which you know that thing, and a person who knows that thing. So which is called the Triputi, the triad of knowledge, Triputi. So this Triputi is based entirely on adhyasa, a wrong reading or a mistaken perception of reality. And if there were no adhyasa, then you would not have any kind of knowledge, you would not have any kind of experience. Also, memory plays a great role in adhyasa. So now there is this whole question, whether the hen came first or the egg came first. And that leads us to a infinite regress. And that infinite regress in logic comes. And the same thing is applicable here also, that whatever we understand using pramanas, means of knowledge, whatever we understand that all of those means of knowledge, all of those pramanas, they operate only because there is ajnana, avidya or adhyasa. If there were no adhyasa, jnana or avidya, which are just synonyms of the same thing, then this means of knowledge will not operate. So here there is another aspect to this, a very important aspect to this Adhyasa Bhashya, is one has to understand the problem we are dealing with. And the problem has to be understood at a transcendental level, where actually even the general methods of understanding do not happen there, because transcendental level, when I transcend the mind, so there is no understanding basically there. But it is at that level one has to at least aspire for that level of experience to go beyond this framework of regular transactional day-to-day daily experience. So here, as it is told in the traditional circles, if someone understands the real import of Adhyasa Bhashya, that person will get the knowledge of Brahman. That is the wisdom which is given by traditional acharyas, that if someone understands the import of Adhyasa Bhashya, that person will get the knowledge of Brahman. Why is that said so much? Because this here we understand that whatever we think about knowledge, whatever we think about understanding, whatever we think about contemplation, or even the process of thinking, everything is basically, all our education, everything is based on Adhyasa. So even the fact that we are now talking this and we are studying Adhyasa or Adhyasa Bhashya is based on Adhyasa. So this gives rise to this problem of circular logic. Like pramanas are based on Adhyasa. How do you know that Adhyasa is there? Because of pramana, including Shabda Pramana, where we are reading Adhyasa Bhashya, and then through Adhyasa Bhashya we know that there is something called Adhyasa, or we know it through studying the Vedas, or we know it through studying some other scriptures, or we know it through the teachings of some saint or some teacher, guru. In all these cases, pramana is based on Adhyasa. You know Adhyasa based on pramanas. So this is circular logic. So we really don't know what is Adhyasa unless we transcend Adhyasa. So this point, generally couched in kind of an esoteric language or a difficult to understand language, in many texts it is there. For example, Ashtavakra Samhita, Avadhuta Gita. These texts talk about the same thing, but they are very difficult to understand, or it is quite esoteric to understand, or rather heights of imagination. We think, what kind of statement is this in all these texts? The same idea has been put forth by Shankaracharya, Bhagavad Shankaracharya, in such a simple language. So this is the problem. So the interdependence of the means of knowledge and the idea or the knowledge that Adhyasa is there, they are interdependent. And that is a problem again. Now, Bhashyakara, he goes further. He says, what is error? So here you see, there is a difference, which of course traditional acharyas, we know very well, have expounded at length. But he says that what is this mithya and what is this adhyasa? How do people explain this adhyasa? So then he brings in various ideas, also from Buddhist ideas, etc. So he does not name anyone, but he gives 6 ideas which are prevalent, which are there or which were there at that time, even now it is prevalent, of how to look at this error, this adhyasa. What is adhyasa? Mistaking one thing for the other, and also mistaking the properties of one thing for the properties of other. So the adhyasa is twofold. Superimposition is twofold. One is that you mistake A for B, and you also mistake the properties of A to be the properties of B. This is adhyasa. Now, Bhagavad Shankaracharya, he says how people are looking, different people, how are they looking at Adhyasa? How they consider this avidya or ignorance to be. And that he explains. And then one by one, he explains why these things are not, these other ideas are not correct, or why they are not logical. So, to say that there is something other than Ātman, or to say that there is something other than the ultimate reality Brahman, that basically does not have any logical basis. This he tells in a simple, easy to understand language. Also, he critiques ideas of Dvaita, or ideas where they accept whatever is seen, that is, ideas of materialism. He rejects that because they are not logical. Now, Shankaracharya Deva, in the beginning itself, he says that it is difficult, uh, tama prakashavat, viruddha swabhava. So, we have completely conflicting properties. Swabhava, properties or nature, like light and darkness. So, the subject and object have completely opposing properties, like light and darkness, but yet this is what we observe, that people confuse the object for the subject for the object, vice versa. It is both ways, both ways, bidirectional. And also the properties of the object are superimposed on the subject, on the properties of the subject. The properties of the subject are superimposed on the properties of the object. So this thing happens. And though it is tama prakashavat, it is completely just like light and darkness cannot stay in the same place. They cannot happen. But this is what we see. This is the loka vyavahara. This is the experience of people in general. By saying this, Bhagavad Shankaracharya brings in logically, in the very beginning itself, this idea that yes, we are not rejecting the experience. So we are accepting experience because experience is there. We experience, it is an experience of everyone. So how can we reject that? So we accept that. And by doing that, he brings these two levels. One is the Vyavaharika level and the Paramarthika level. The ultimate level of the truth and the transactional level, or the level of experience, Vyavaharika level. So this is a great contribution of Bhagavad Pada Shankaracharya, and that he does by simply accepting that yes, but even if somebody does not accept, that is the fact. So by saying that, see, this is the experience of people, and this is quite natural to confuse truth with untruth. Satya anrite mithuni kritya. We have this loka vyavahara. We confuse, we jumble up truth with untruth, and we have this experience. So this bringing Paramarthika and Vyavaharika, accepting both, not denying the experience, and that doing because, so here there is an amazement, the voice of amazement or bewilderment, that why does this happen? We don't know. So that also is inherent in this text, that the inability to understand why this happens. Why this happens, we don't know. And that is a great thing. That's a great thing, because many people try to understand ignorance, and that's a lost cause. And also, we don't need to understand ignorance. Because if we understand ignorance, how is it going to help us? What we need to understand is reality. we need to understand reality. If we understand reality, then automatically ignorance will go away. Suffering caused because of ignorance will go away, and we will know our true nature. So that is exactly what Bhagavad Shankaracharya is telling here. Another thing is, from the beginning, he brings in the concept of how Ātman and Anatma. Atma is different from Anatma. That is how reality is different from this mistaken perception. That is brought in the beginning itself very clearly. How it is different. So, like Chid Atma, this idea that Atma is Chit is already brought in the beginning itself. And so that it's not possible to confuse Atman with Anatman. It is not possible because it is so obvious, but yet that is happening. Again, relying on his example of Tama and Prakasha, light and darkness. It is so obvious that light and darkness cannot be confused for one another, but that is what is happening. So again, here is that voice of bewilderment is there. Why it is happening, we don't know. And here, nowhere he tries to focus on understanding why this is happening. He takes this as a reality, as an experience, and says, this is the problem. Now we have to work to get rid of this problem, or to go beyond this problem and to transcend this problem. Now here, again, all the arguments made here are based on logic, which again is based on Adhyasa, as Bhagavad himself says, but it's all based on logic. There is no statement, not even a word, which is not based on logic. So how a person can develop a piece of argument which is quite fundamental? In fact, the very process of reasoning or rational is questioned in this text. But that can be done using logic. That's a big example. And in the beginning itself, see what he uses. He says, Yushmad Asmad Pratyaya Gocharayoho Vishaya Vishayinoho. So, Yushmad Asmad Pratyaya Gocharayoho Vishaya Vishayinoho. The ideas or the cognition, the thought brought by the pronouns Yushmad and Asmad, or the ideas brought by the pronouns I and you and I. So here the idea is Vishaya and Vishayina. That means object and subject. Vishaya, object, Vishay, subject. This idea brought by these words are basically transactional. And this is what we do all the time in our daily experience, in this worldly experience, in this human condition, so to say. So now this is based on language, and our language itself betrays our confusion, adhyasa, ajnana, avidya. And that he brings it. So there is some kind of semantics involved here, and which is very clear. So he does not take any example which is distanced. He just says, look, suppose we were to imagine a conversation between a teacher and the disciple, a guru, shishya. Then he says, look, Yushmad Asmad, this our dealing with one another. This itself is based on a mistaken notion of reality. So here, all these ideas, again, which he brings later, that somebody is fat, somebody is lean, somebody is dumb, somebody is deaf. All these kinds of ideas which are based on the ideas of how we perceive the body or the qualities of the body have been superimposed on that person, have been superimposed on that person because of, again, a logical mistake. So, to put it in other words, another language, all our logic is based basically on an illogical understanding of reality. This is what Bhagavad is saying. All our logic, all our dealings is based on an illogical understanding of reality. But that is how we deal with people. That is how we deal with people. So, this whole thing of mistaken perception, it starts with us, and also us means subjectively and also objectively. So I also consider myself not to be what I am really, and then I see also in front of me what is there not to be really what it is actually. So that leads to lot of confusion. So I think I am sitting, I think I am jumping, I think I am fair complexioned, I think I am dark complexioned, all these things, which are basically properties of the body, but I superimpose that on me. So also I was alluding to the problem of whether hen came first or egg came first, which would definitely lead to anavastha dosha or infinite regress. Now here Bhagavad Shankaracharya, he quite intelligently, quite tactfully avoids that problem. He just says that, see, everything is because of mistaken perception. And so when you do that, this infinite regress problem is completely removed, because mistaken perception, adhyasa cannot be having a problem of infinite regress, because that is the cause of everything, all experience, mistaken perception. And also he logically proves that what we think to be logic is illogical. And that is the beginning itself. He says, can darkness and light exist in one place? It cannot. It cannot. Can the substratum have the properties of that which is on the substratum? It cannot. Can the object have the properties of the subject? It cannot. But though it is impossible, though it is illogical, this is what happens. And so we can say, yuktam, it is quite logical to say that it is mithya. It is a fallacious understanding. So he, using logic, proves that what we consider logic or what we perceive mistakenly, that is quite illogical. So there is this contradictory knowledge which is there, considering Atma as Anatma or Anatma as Atma, that Shankaracharya, he very clearly says that, and that is a beauty. In the first sentence itself, he cleans it up, means he clears this up. He avoids infinite regress, anavastha dosha. He does not go into circular logic, but he says that we are basing everything on circular logic, and he says that it is impossible to happen. Uh, it is not upapatta, upapatti is not there, means it does not stand to logic. And but still we do that. We do that. And in the second sentence he says, this is loka vyavahara hai. Tathapi anyonyasmin anyonya atmakatam anyonya dharmascha adhyasya itara itara avivekena. Because of lack of discernment, this atyanta viviktayoho dharma dharminoho mithya jnana nimittah satya anrite mithuni kritya. Satya anrite mithuni kritya. Jumbling up, combining satya and anrita. These which are completely different. Atyanta viviktayoho dharma dharminaha. That which is the substratum of a property and that which is the property or object and subject, all are completely different. In spite of that, we tathapi, even though it is illogical, we confuse them because of lack of viveka, discernment. So the problem in the first two sentences itself, Bhagavad-pada has cleared the problem. What is the problem? He has clearly stated it. Why it happens? He has clearly stated this also. Aviveka, because of aviveka, because of discernment, because we are lack of discernment, because we are unable to see what is obvious. And though it is contradictory to logic, we are following that. That is the thing. And here, starting with what is known, Yushmad Asmad is known. Everybody understands that. You and I. This is a known thing. There is no confusion there. I and you, known thing. Using that cognition of I and you, Bhagavad-pada, he step by step develops this argument and see how much space he takes for that. Just 2 sentences, that's all. 2 sentences and it is over. So this is what is the problem. And though it is a problem, it is quite obvious we are unable to understand. Why? Because of lack of discernment, lack of viveka. We are understanding something which are completely different to be confused with one another. So logically he puts the problem, and we know in philosophy there is something called as, if you can, there is this concept of Occam's razor and all that. If you can tell something in a easiest way or a shortest way, that is what you have to do. Now, this kind of minimalism of argument is unprecedented, and for arguing for something which is so fundamental a problem is unprecedented. In 2 sentences, nobody has proven this fundamental problem of adhyasa. So that is again a beautiful thing which Bhagavad-pada Shankaracharya does here. And he brings examples which again do not bank on tradition, do not bank on textual authority. He brings in examples, and those examples are from daily life, and he explains that in a manner that everyone will understand. It's so simple. There is no confusion there. And that's again other greatness of this text. Now, going further, see, though Bhagavad-pada does not quote any scripture here, he successfully, in short space, refutes the other theories, other positions of Nyāya Vaisheshika, Buddhism, Mīmāṃsā, and Sāṅkhya. So their theories of error or Khyāti-vāda, their theories of error, he simply rejects them or he refutes them using logic. So, for example, in the case of Mīmāṃsā, how is it that the self is a doer or an experiencer. In the case of Nyāya Vaisheshika, who basically are realists, who talk about the universe. So how can one have this idea of Paramanu being very fundamental to this universe and how it is logically contradicting? Then he brings in Sāṅkhya's ideas of error and he dismisses them. He brings in the idea of Buddhist idea of error, Kshanikavada, and then he dismisses them. Towards the end of the Adhyasa Bhashya, we see that Bhagavad he brings in two concepts, which we all know, but he brings in those concepts. He says, see, first of all, evam ayam anadihi anantaha naisargikaha adhyasah. This adhyasa, which he earlier says is also called avidya or adhyasa, avidya, ajnana. It's also called ajnana. So, this adhyasa, which is anadi, which is without any beginning, which is anantaha naisargika adhyasaha, which is also without any end in the sense of it does not have an end in a collective level. So, naisargika adhyasa, that adhyasa is happening all the time. So, naisargika, and it is natural, and it is mithya pratyaya rupa. It gives us false cognition. And that is sarvaloka pratyaksha hai. It is not something one needs to elaborate because everybody knows that. Everybody knows that. And what is it? It is kartritva, bhoktritva, pravartaka hai. It is the cause, or it is what brings in the idea, kartritva, of agency or doership. It is what brings in the idea of experience-ship or enjoyership. That means it is what this adhyasa gives rise to these two ideas, that I am the doer, I am the enjoyer or the experiencer. So this is the problem. Asya anartha hetoho grahanaya atma ekatva vidya pratipattaye. So sarve vedantaha arabhyante. So this is something which is leading to all confusion, and this adhyasa and consequent ideas of doership and enjoyership. So here this doership and enjoyership he brings and shows that this is how adhyasa is acting. And so this has to be removed. And for that we will study now, we will begin the study of Vedanta. We will begin the study of Vedanta. Now, that beginning of study of Vedanta is done because it will remove the problem of Adhyasa, which will also remove the problem of the idea of agency or experientialship. So here, he also, by telling about other ideas of Adhyasa, that is other ideas of error, other theories of error, he automatically rejects many theories like Shunyavada, Vijnanavada, etc. All the theories of non-identity of the self and Brahman, Ātman and Brahman, Jiva and Brahman, that he rejects by these logical development of arguments. So here, though he is again not quoting grammar points like that, but he uses grammar, he uses words, the basic meaning of words, the root meaning of words, to come at conclusions about Adhyasa. So that is again something which is great. And at one point, we come to understand that everything which we know, everything which we understand, everything is based on Adhyasa. And also he brings this idea of how we operate in the world. So just like a animal, when the animal will listen to something which is conducive to it, it could be some kind of sound, etc. Then the animal will go towards the source of the sound. When it listens to something which is not conducive, which is kind of not agreeable to that animal, it will go away from that sound. Also, if a person is giving some grass, etc., to animal, say cow, then that cow will come towards that person. If that person is raising a stick to strike, then that person will not be approached by the cow. The cow will think that this person wants to kill me or hurt me and will go away. So here, what basically uh, Bhagavad Shankaracharya says is that there is no difference, avishesha, there is no difference between our experiences or our transactions in daily life with those of animals. Pashvadibihischa avisheshat. There is no difference basically. Whatever we do based on pramana, pratyaksha adini pramani, whatever we do based on the pramana or means of knowledge which we have, that is based on avidya, that is based on adhyasa, ajnana, superimposition. And because of that, whatever we do based on that kind of knowledge, there is no difference, essential difference between our dealings and the dealings of the animals, etc. So basically, there is no difference because they also, when they see something favorable or agreeable to them, they go near it. When they see something pratikula, disagreeable or unfavorable to them, they go away from it. So basically, there is not much difference between what they do and we do. And so this is all caused because of adhyasa. So this idea also that somehow we human beings are great, somehow we have some great faculty, etc., because we are able to process knowledge at a different level, etc. This also, according to Bhagavad Pada, is a mistaken knowledge. It's a mistaken knowledge. It's not true. It's not true. So automatically the corollary is, immediately we understand that only when we are able to transcend this adhyasa, then only then we can say that we are greater than other living beings. Not before that. Because whatever we do, so generally our idea of human beings being greater than other living beings comes from the idea that we have been able to get more knowledge, we have been able to process knowledge more, etc. So we have computers, we have rocket science, etc. This is what we think. But here, Shankaracharya, Bhagavad Shankaracharya, he very clearly says that there is no difference. There is avishesha, there is no difference between us and other living beings because we also act based on pramana, means of knowledge, and we also act based on whatever is favorable to us and whatever is unfavorable to us. So basically, that is the same thing which the animals or the other living beings do. Also, he also brings up the case of Shastra, that is the scriptures. Like in scriptures also, whatever we do, thinking ourselves to be quite intelligent, using our buddhi, intelligence, etc. But that also is based on adhyasa. That also is based on adhyasa. That also is based on avidya. So all these ideas which we get from Shastras, they are all based on adhyasa. And also our varna, ashrama, uh, all these avastha, they are adhyasam ashritya pravartante. They all operate depending on adhyasa. And here, I have mentioned it earlier also, Bhagavad he gives many definitions of adhyasa. At various points, he gives many definitions of adhyasa. So, to confuse oneself with one's children, one's spouse, etc., to confuse oneself with one's body, etc., which are basically properties other than that of Ātman. So, and to superimpose those properties on Ātman, this is Adhyasa. This is Adhyasa. So, also to superimpose all these kind of desires, the different kinds of resolutions that I will do something, etc., on oneself is Adhyasa. So all this is Adhyasa. So that is why it is very difficult for us to come out of this, because whatever we are doing is all because of Adhyasa, because of avidya, ajnana. So that is what Shankaracharya, very logically he puts this here. And he also drives home the point that we use various words for different things which are basically logically, they don't make sense when we are trying to connect them with Ātman. We are trying to connect them with Ātman. They don't make sense. So that also he clearly brings here. Now, though Bhagavad Shankaracharya is using simple language here, clear language, concise language, brevity is there, it is quite brief. But he does not go away from the philosophical points of Advaita Vedānta. For example, no point does this idea that Ātman is a Sakshi. That is not contradicted anywhere here. The point of Ātman being Desha Kala Atita, that is beyond time, space and causation, that is not contradicted, or that is not even means even by mistake, that is not contradicted here. The idea that Brahman is the cause is not contradicted here, but Maya is the reason why everything happens, or Adhyasa is the reason why everything happens, is also not contradicted here. And by giving the examples of the shell and silver, uh, Rajata Shukti, or by giving the example of Rajju Sarpa, that is snake and rope, all these examples can be dissected, they can be finely analyzed, but these examples are very appropriate here. And here, Bhagavad Shankaracharya, he also, without telling it in so many words, brings home the point which I was mentioning in the beginning, that one needs to step back. One needs to step back from the experiential level or transcend the experiential level to understand this. In Sanskrita, there is this word tatastha. So one has to step back to understand the problem, to have some kind of anasakti or asanga, uh, detachment, to understand the logic or the lack of logic in logic, to understand the problem of the ideas of kartrutva, that is agency, and the idea of one being the experiencer, because these are the problems which are leading to suffering, and these problems have to be clarified by, or these problems have to be transcended by understanding Vedanta. So, which again, understanding Vedanta will again happen based on Adhyasa, but then you have to use Adhyasa to get rid of it. And here, the self, one Sakshi or Ātman, who is seeing everything, there is a continuity of that Ātman. That also is clarified here in Adhyasa Bhashya, that there is one self which is seeing everything. And that self is that self which provides continuity in our experience and otherwise. And the difference between Jada and Chitta, difference between Chaitanya and non-Chaitanya, Atma and Anatma, is also clearly put here. And the self-revealing nature of Atman, that also is brought home here. And also how the self cannot become an object, or Atma cannot become an object, that also has been very clearly mentioned here. So here, if we look at this text, Adhyasa Bhashya, from a Western perspective, I would say Western philosophical perspective, even then, generally, this is the case that the way we philosophize in Indian traditions is different. We call it darshana. That is why we call it darshana. It's an inquiry. It is an anvishiki. It's an inquiry. It is darshana. It is a revelation, etc. That is true. But if you see this text, Adhyasa Bhashya, even if one were to put it through the eyes of a Western philosopher, even then, this text is an excellent text. Means even a Western philosopher who do not generally go by the ideas of Anvishiki or Darshana, etc., they will also find this text to be absolutely brilliant, because this text dissects the problem of suffering. Why is suffering there? Very clearly it puts it. So, and also, generally, all our texts on Advaita Vedanta, there is a mistaken perception that they are very difficult. Sometimes they are also difficult. I was referring to Ashtavakra Samhita and Avadhuta Gita. They are difficult to understand, etc. But here is a text which is the most fundamental of Advaita Vedanta texts, and it is so simple to understand. So this Advaita to be something which is basically simple. Advaita is something which is simple understanding or clear understanding, concise understanding, even logically, is brought home here. And so that is why it's a marvelous text where Bhagavad Shankaracharya Deva, using logic alone, proves that logic is based on wrong understanding. That is the classical thing he does. He uses logic, and using logic, he proves that what we call logic is based on a mistaken perception. So this kind of a text, Adhyasa Bhashya, I think, I don't know why, but whenever we talk about Adhyasa Bhashya, it's a general perception, and it is widespread, more widespread than I thought earlier it was. people are like, oh, Adhyasa Bhashya, it is such a difficult text, how we will study, etc. That is a big misconception, which is not at all based on truth. And so this text has to be studied by people even who do not want to lead a spiritual life, who just want to be materialists, hedonists. This text, I think, should be made compulsory reading for everyone, because how one can argue, how one can develop an argument is classically shown by Bhagavad Pada in this text. I thank Nitinji and his team for giving me this opportunity to just talk about this text. And traditionally, we believe, as I told you earlier, that if one understands the import of this text, that person will become a Brahmagyani. And other thing is also that to understand Advaita Vedanta, all you need to understand is Adhyasa Bhashya. And Adhyasa Bhashya, many people believe that it is deceptively simple. It has got layers and layers of meaning. But I differ from that thought. I think that Bhagavad Pada Shankaracharya Deva wanted it to be simple, and just reading it as a simple text, not going into the layers and layers of meaning, again making big commentaries on that. Just reading it as it is will give us great clarity on what is the problem of the human condition and also what is the problem of the living condition. Thank you. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Shri Ram Krishna Arpanamastu.
We thank Swamiji for this enlightening session. And we also hope that Adhyasa Bhashya and such texts become integral part of our syllabuses, since we are having new education policy somewhere in IKS. Thank you. We will be, as all of you know, we have sessions in the morning and evening. So in the evening, stay tuned in for the next session by Udaya Acharya. It would be on Shankaracharya's meditation versus on the inner self. Thank you.